James, welcome to the show. Would you mind giving an introduction to tell everybody out there who do not know you, who you are, and where you are, by the way, too?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. We've been trying to pull this off for a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You kept getting. I'm the lowest profile guy you've had so far, so thanks for the invite. I really
We love
appreciate
you.
it.
Your competitors have been coming out of the water.
They've done a great job. So, yeah, I'm James. I'm the CEO at USA Truck, kind of the chief bottle washer. I say that it's my job to sweep the floors and mop the hallways and do whatever the team needs me to do. My
I like that.
background is maybe a little unique for trucking and transportation, although I've always been in supply chain. So spent about 10 years at Intel and then a whole bunch of other tech companies, T-Mobile, Wamu.com, EMC, and kind of got into trucking serendipitously. And it's, as you know, it's addicting. Yeah,
It
it's
is.
than I've ever done.
It's like once you get in trucking, you can't get out. You're stuck. You're in it, and then your family gets in it too. Uh,
Cosa Nostra, man.
so this today has been really. Oh, hi, Laszlo. Laszlo says that he used to be an agent for you, James. He loves your company.
Awesome.
So we are dominated, I can see, by shippers today. And I figured that would happen because we had a time change. So normally on Wednesday, James, as you know, actually every show I have is at 2 o'clock Chicago time. And then people started getting really busy, but then the more shippers we got onto the show, the more they started telling me they want a evening show so they can watch the whole thing live. So today I was like, let's try. Let's see what happens when we go 6 o'clock Chicago time. And I can see that we are probably going to have a really good turnout. So let's dive right in because the topics, when I called my friends and my followers, and I was like, what do you want to hear from James? What do you want to learn from him? Because I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but many executives often stay within one company their whole career and work their way up, which is admirable. But we also love those who have a diverse background as well, because there's a lot to learn from them along with the current role they have, and that would be you, because I love your diverse background. So the questions that came in were interesting, and today, for those of you who are just joining us, you have James Reed from USA Truck, and today we're going to talk about, why is our trucking industry, the rates and capacity, so volatile? We're going to talk about James's view of what to expect for the rest of the year. And also, just so you guys know, James used to be CFO at USA Truck as well. So he's bringing in a lot of that financial background too. So we're very lucky. And then if we have time, I'm gonna try my hardest to watch your questions on LinkedIn and on Zoom. And if we have time, we're also going to talk about where USA Truck is seeing the growth in the industry. And then also, I threw this one in here because you have such a diverse background. I really wanted to know your thoughts on why the trucking part of our industry, the actual trucking companies, why are they so slow to change? So we've got a really busy hour planned, and I'm very excited. I'm very grateful you joined us. So let's hit on rates first, and let's talk, James, on both rates and capacity. Why are they so volatile in our industry? And many shippers get frustrated and they also laugh at us kind of because they're purchasing goods from other areas, not just transportation. And they're like, your transportation industry, I mean, within what, 4 months, we've gone from overcapacity to now it's tightening rates all the way up and all the way down. I'm like ripping my hair out. What,
Yeah.
help us here a little bit.
Yeah,
This is a
yeah.
big topic.
I wish I could. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, in May, we even had the lowest spot rates we've had in the history of the index. And so you're right. It's just been this crazy roller coaster. I think there's a tendency to kind of separate asset pricing and non-asset pricing,
Hmm.
treat them as different things. But I really think they're part of a necessary ecosystem. And they kind of, you hear all this stuff. The prevailing opinion in the industry is that, you know, spot prices move and then contract prices ultimately follow those. But I was talking to an investment banker, a former investment banker, the other day, maybe a few weeks ago, and they've tried to figure out the mathematical relationship between those moves. And his group of really smart people couldn't figure it out. But even though they can't figure out the mathematical kind of connectivity of it, I think we all know that they kind of move together and they move directionally. So why? This is where, I'm not the best trucker that you'll meet. I'm aspiring to be. I have, a man crush on a number of really awesome truckers in our industry, and I mostly just copy what they're doing. But my background being a little bit different, I tend to be maybe a little more cerebral about some of these things. And I think the reason that pricing moves is because it is fundamental to economics. Like I tell everybody, this industry is best understood from your Econ 101 class, basic supply and demand. And, when supply becomes really abundant, price goes down. And when of course there are supply and demand dynamics there, but when supply becomes abundant and demand's level, prices go down. When demand goes up through the roof and supply goes down, prices rise. So it's a very predictable kind of thing. Now, that's how the economists would talk about it. Maybe I don't know if it's a better question, but a different angle on the question is, why does capacity move so much?
Yes.
Because the demand side is what it is, right? We all have heard, 2/3 of the U.S. economy is a consumer-driven economy. And so for the most part, a lot of the economic inputs into the overall economy, and therefore the things that drive demand in our industry, are pretty steady. I mean, even in the highs and lows, they're pretty steady. Walmart's going to ship a ton of freight, even when the economy's high, when the economy's low. The supply side is much more interesting to me. So, you never want to look at your competitors as bad actors. I don't think that that's what happens, but I do think that that groups of people behave in their own economic best interests, if that makes sense. And so, let's just go back and look at history, not that far ago, because I don't have a good memory, but 2018 was bonkers, right? The economy was going crazy, and it's the old adage: if you have a truck and a relationship, you can get into transportation. So this may not be true for every individual that's listening today or that's in our industry, but people that were swinging hammers and roofing and doing construction or doing other types of jobs, working on farms, said, wait, I can make a lot of money in trucking. So they put down all those trades and they went to trucking, and it drove capacity up. And they made some money in the short term. When that capacity rushes in, there's an oversupply of capacity and pricing drops. And that's what we saw in 2019, what turned out to be a pretty crummy year for most truckers. So I have a lot more to say about this, but I'd love for you to interject, or if you have any other.
No, you're spot on, and I love that you're not focusing on demand, because, and I can already see, if you can see the comments at all, both on LinkedIn and on Zoom, everybody's already catching on that you're very authentic and they're liking it. So, because that's really important to us. But I'll tell you that we've had shippers on here that say this, and one of our famous shippers is Ron King, and he'll always tell us, Cassandra, Christmas comes every year. And every summer, everybody goes berserk ordering the same amount of drinks and barbecuing food and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's the same, the demand stays the same. So why is this industry, the supply, all over the place? And so I love that you came right out and said that. I wonder sometimes, and some of you out there are going to hate me for saying this, do we need to have a higher barrier of entry for trucking companies? And broker.
Yeah,
I mean, I would like to say brokers too, but at the same time, they're not the ones running the freight. Maybe brokers, but what do you think when you hear something like that?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I've been on a bit of a road trip. You asked me to tell where I am. I'm sitting in a hotel in Scottsdale. I think you and I are probably close together.
Yeah, like a mile away.
Yeah, but we couldn't get a studio because of COVID, so here we sit. And I'm visiting my granddaughter. But as I've been going around, I stopped in Cowley, Wyoming, which I don't expect anybody to know where that is, but one of my very dear friends, you can follow him on Twitter. Sorry, Cassandra, can I give out?
Oh, cool. Go for it.
Yeah, NBA Cowboy. So he's the guy that his name's Brett Crosby. He's one of my best friends. He's the guy that, the Squawk Box brings on to talk about ag economic issues, and he's a really brilliant guy. He also happens to run a gigantic cattle ranch, and he and I were talking about all of this kind of stuff. Many of the rules that apply in commoditized markets like agriculture, like trucking, apply to us, obviously. And so when you say barriers to entry, I think a lot of people have heard about Porter's Five Forces, or they read about it in school. I even heard one of our competitors try to explain it in an investment conference, and it was a disaster when they did it. But at its core in trucking, if you have a truck and a relationship, you can get a job. And we have this, I always like to talk about it like this circle graph, right? And if you think about, we have this in our investor deck, we have a slide, it blows my mind to this day. The top 100 truckload carriers make up 10% of that circle.
It's nuts, isn't it?
And so it's highly fragmented, right?
It is. And
so,
you can tell people who aren't part of our industry or don't quite get our industry yet, they'll say comments like, well, all the big trucking companies control everything. And I'm like, we're actually the industry that's not accurate. 80% of the industry is small truckers.
Well, right. And because of the lack of barriers to entry, I mean, it's relatively inexpensive and relatively easy to get in. It's difficult to control. And I don't use those words, especially with a lawyer. You can't control the market in any way, shape, or form. And so what happens, what I would say to this shipper is, if you want prices to stay level, then we need to talk about longer term pricing agreements that bring stability to both the customer and the carrier. Relationships need to mean something. I wish they did. They really don't. I mean, some of our most strategic customers lead with price almost all the time. Yep. And we have a business, Davis Transfer, that we bought back in 2018. I mean, they have a customer who's a great customer. We love the customer, but they literally had 10 years of 99.5% on-time delivery to this customer. And that's no exaggeration. And they replaced us last year with a lower price carrier. And so I get it, but look, everybody has a role to play in this. And so frankly, if you put yourself, and I try to ask our team to do this all the time, you put yourself in the shipper's shoes. I mean, imagine that you're a purchasing agent at a giant company. And even worse, imagine that you're not really a transportation expert. A lot of people are procurement folks, right? And you got your CFO, caving your head in because everybody else's, shipping costs are going down. And the only way you can really do that is either go to your existing carrier who owns assets and has a big investment to be able to support you as a customer and ask them to take a lower rate, or go to the open market. And the open market makes it easy and a bit frictionless to do it. And so that's why it moves. And I will tell you, and I hope this is okay, Cassandra, if you want to reel me in, as you think about what's going on with COVID, and even I don't know, it's crazy, right? So think about 2019, tough year for transportation. We go into the drug clearinghouse. You've got some expected, anticipated issues with diesel, which turned out not to happen at all because the fuel markets blew up, kind of imploded. Then COVID hits. So you've got this hypothermia of the freight market. If you think about, my hands represent the country, and these are the coasts. Imports stop, demand just gets centralized in the middle of the country, and that's before we knew COVID was a big deal to our own health. And so you've got all these guys and gals that own trucks on the coast. They don't have any business all of a sudden. What do? They run to the middle. What does that do? You got lots of capacity, demand hasn't changed at all, prices go down, right? And then COVID really hits us. I mean, that was a Chinese COVID effect. Now you got the U.S. COVID effect. So if this is imports, let's use our hands to kind of connote demand. Demand naturally shrinks in the U.S. because non-essential shippers stop shipping, and honestly, they still haven't really recovered. Essential shippers keep shipping. So now you've got, all these people are competing for the same amount of demand.
Yep.
Prices go down, and then the demand shrinks. Prices go down further, and then the government jumps in and offers $1,200, and they offer the PPP loans. And,
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a capitalist pig, and I hurt for these people that are affected. And I don't mean to get political in my comments, but when you start buoying up, businesses that were already failing or struggling going into it, you're not doing a good thing, because you're just delaying the inevitable.
You're delaying the inevitable. And we talk about this quite a bit on this show as well. Before we get into that part, and Amanda Miller says it's a truth bomb, which was an ultimate truth bomb that's just been dropped on us right now. I can tell by the comments, like, we're all eating this up. So, excuse me. I want to take a step back, because you just hit on a point that everybody in Madtropolis loves to talk about, because we're all trying to figure out how to work through it, which is shippers who go for the low price freight, and they go for that first. And indeed, as every day that goes by, we have more and more and more shippers joining this following, and they themselves will come on the show and tell us that they have a CFO who will come to them and say, your transportation costs are too high. You need to lower them. And they do not want to leave the carrier or the broker who's been doing an amazing job for them. They don't want to. And they have no choice. They have to go for a cheaper option. And then it stresses them out, because that means more work for the person running that department, for the shipper. And a lot of people have been in this industry for a long time, and I bet this is what you think too. They say, just be patient. Those shippers will be back. But some of the shippers will tell us, we don't know, because we have to deal with the higher ups. And then, by the way, for those of you who watched the interview from last week with the head of Uber Freight, after that interview, which was interesting, but I got a lot of tough feedback about that interview. And a lot of people came to me and said, Cassandra, I'm a shipper, and Uber has a lot of money and a lot of executives and a lot of investment. They went over my head to my executives, and that's why I have to run freight with them right now. And it's nothing but a headache. And let's be real, that's what this show's about, right? It's about being authentic, it's being real. So you hit on that pain point that all of us are trying to work through. And a lot of it is patience. And a lot of it is, I feel bad for shippers sometimes, because, I don't know, I've been told that if you're a shipper and you run a transportation department in your big company, you're often like the redheaded stepchild. And people don't truly understand the transportation industry, and knee-jerk decisions are forced on you. So it's interesting to get this whole dynamic in here, and then hear you say that you're seeing it as well, and you're dealing with it as well. So the other thing that I was wondering, and I asked the head of the FMCSA the same question, which was, when the FMCSA lowered the restrictions for regulations, did that allow us to be flooded with more capacity than we truly needed? And what are your thoughts, if you can even answer that, if you've even thought about it? That's me really nerding it out here. But yeah. I went to the head of FMCSA, and I was like, hey, you need to pull back those regulation waivers, because you're killing us here. And he's like, Cassandra, it's not that easy. Like, life is not that easy, Cassandra.
Yeah. Well, you hit on a bunch of things there, so don't let me forget the points that you made. So with respect to FMCSA, it's funny. I see some of our public competitors make commentary about, or observations about, capacity, whether it's higher or lower. I just don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know how they know the answer to that question. The only way...
How does anybody know the answer to that question, truly?
What's that?
How does anybody know the answer to that question, truly?
Well, the only way you really know is by virtue of the bid environment in the spot market, right? As shippers get more and more desperate for capacity, they're willing to pay more, and you start to get phone calls, and it's a very fluid thing, and it moves. So I don't have any observational statistics that tell me, oh yeah, it's either artificially moved it higher or what have you. Yeah, as I was out, visiting with Brett, the rancher, another rancher out in Eastern Oregon, they actually asked me about, oh, hey, did the restrictions change? Is my radius for my farm exemption bigger now? Oh my gosh! Like, you want to haul? Are you hauling cows, or are you hauling for anyway? So with respect to kind of purchasing and transportation being, I think the words you used, the redheaded stepchild, it's funny. My first 6 years at Intel, I worked in what they call CSMO, it's commodity management, with supply chain management. And that's exactly right. I mean, if you think about these big shippers, their product is not transportation. Their product is retail. Their product is appliances. Their product is auto parts. And, I was a career finance guy. And when I would go speak to students, I would always tell them, like, look, when you're in a support function, you've got to be comfortable with anonymity. If you're not, like, I'm a finance guy. If I want to be the cat's meow, then I should go work at a company where finance is the product, right? So many of the shippers that we all work with, they really are, they're really smart, by the way.
Yeah.
They're not class citizens, but they are a support function. And what I always try to tell our team, like, look, imagine their conversations, because I've been that guy, right? Imagine their conversations. They've got internal customers who have P&L targets, that have profitability goals, that have, needs to receive freight at a certain time because that's when they have employees there, or that's when they need the raw materials to run their production line. And the costs of being wrong on that are extreme, and they don't get any love. They're a little bit like a referee in a basketball game in those companies. When it's going well, nobody recognizes them, and when it went hell in a handbasket, they hear it.
Yes.
It's a tough thing. So how do you fix it? I don't know the answer. Many of our customers, are moving more to dedicated capacity. When they just get tired of it and they're like, look, they understand the cost of the variability exceeds the benefit of the cost savings, they will move into dedicated configurations. So that's one of those things we're doing. I would just encourage shippers that are listening to truly consider the total cost of ownership. I don't know that people really understand.
Oh my God, you're
the
gonna
switching
hit on
costs.
another hot spot.
Oh, did
Yeah, that's
well,
a
I don't
good
know
one.
if they
Go ahead,
really
Faye, it's a really
understand
good one.
if they really understand the switching costs, right? So, I'm just going to switch out a carrier because I can save 3 cents on this lane. And now all of a sudden, you're losing productive capacity at your factory or your warehouse or your DC, whatever it is, because you're moving trailers out, you're moving trailers in, you're reacquainting people with new processes, tools, procedures. I don't think people really understand the details, but they're right. They're getting their teeth kicked in by CFO. I was CFO for 18. Like, I was that guy.
You want to know what's really interesting, James, is, okay, don't let me forget, we have to pause and look at the questions and the comments, because I'm going to tell you right now, this is so unprofessional. Pretty sure I've just fallen in love with you. Pretty sure everyone in Madtropolis is falling in love with you. And I promise you, Madtropolis, I did not prep him at all. Right, James? You had no prep. You literally
I've never even watched the show. I told you right before we started, I was a little embarrassed.
Yeah, Tony's saying he's good. Okay, you guys, so I didn't prep him. So I promise. Actually, no one gets prepped when they come on the show. So, shit, I was going to say something that was so good. But we got to pause to go to the questions and answers and the comments. But, I wish I could tell you what I was going to say. Oh, that's what it was. Is everybody who's watching, you have a couple shippers right now, they're going to be your new best friends because they're being forced to switch carriers. And they told me that they have to work twice the amount of hours for the next 2 weeks to get those carriers up to par with their shipments and how everything works and the ins and outs. All right, let me check this because V, one of our shippers, he says, Cassandra or Bill, when talking about long-term pricing, how do you adjust rates per year? Do you just apply a GRI adjustment, adjust fuel, or do your contracts fluctuate as much as the industry? Wow. And so he got thumbs up on this question too.
It depends. So, when you're talking about dedicated accounts, oftentimes and this isn't unique to USA Truck, this is everybody within dedicated. Oftentimes you'll work with the shipper to build in automatic kind of price increases. Usually those are for very specific things like specialized equipment, or more frequently, and shippers really like this actually. They're willing to give rate increases on long-term contracts for driver pay. If it goes to the drivers and makes their lives better and makes their performance better, they're willing to do that. With respect, to general freight, this person asked if we apply a GRI or just fuel. I didn't get to say this earlier, so, and I'm going to go way out into left field. You can reel me in if it's too far. So when I said this is a commoditized business, we have our strategy session next week as an executive team. We do this every single year. Every single year, I ask the team to read Michael Porter's incredible article called What is Strategy? You can get it online. You can buy it from Harvard Business Review. He talks about differentiation, especially in commoditized markets. And you really don't differentiate on price. You really don't differentiate on service. Those are table stakes. You have to do those things. You differentiate on your execution. And so when I talk about that, when I talk about Porter's 5 Forces, same guy, by the way, and then I say things like what I'm about to say a lot. When you work in a commoditized market, the customer has the power in the relationship. That's okay. That's not meant as a resentful comment at all. But you know, when I go to a big customer and go, hey, I got this killer idea. I think we can automate all this stuff. It'll save all kinds of money. And they go, that's an awesome idea. And then they turn to the other 10,000 literally providers and go, I'm going to do it the way I know how to do it. Like, people don't want to try things. It's the same thing with pricing, right? So do we apply a GRI? There have been times in the history of our industry where you just go and you go, we're going to give you a general increase. It's 3%. Most of the time, it's customer specific, especially with our best, most strategic customers. It's a give and take, and it's a conversation, and they're very good about not slaughtering us when times are, you know, going down, and we are very respectful in the same way when times are going up. With respect to fuel, look, we have our fuel program, but remember, the customer has the power in the relationship. You use the customer's fuel program for your biggest customers. That's just the way this industry works. And then do our contracts fluctuate as much as the industry? No, because, you know, we've said this a lot publicly, you know, 95% of our freight moves in contracted freight. Now, some of our bigger, frankly, more profitable competitors who do a better job of managing the fluctuations of the industry, they will intentionally expose more of their business to the spot market when it's going up like it is right now, because they can make more money in the spot market than they can on the contract.
It doesn't even out. Just from a layman, like, I'm just a dumb lawyer, but I've always thought, like, the highs and lows have got to just even out at the end of the day. Just more fucking stressful.
No, you wish that it would. So one of the things that we watch very closely, all the bigger guys do this, and I'm sure some of the smaller companies do, is we watch what's called a realization. So if you got, again, I'll use the circle. If you got this much freight that a customer gives you, and, you know, you only get, you know, 80% of that, right? That's probably a pretty good realization. So what happens, like you were talking earlier about those nasty CFOs like me that are, you know, just banging on procurement people's desks. You know, you got a customer who's getting their teeth kicked in about, you know, their expenditures with respect to transportation. What they will do is they'll take some of your contract freight and take it away from you and offer it out in the spot market.
Whoa.
So you get sometimes pushed into the spot market because you don't have the freight that you planned your network around, that you built your facilities around, that you bought trucks for. Because remember, contracted freight and transportation is only, and you're a lawyer, you'll know more about this than I do, but it's only contract for the terms of carriage. It's not a commitment for freight.
No, it's not. People say, wait, I got to make sure I make a YouTube clip about what you just said, because people get very confused about that. They think that contracted means you won that award, you get those lanes no matter what.
No way.
Done, boom.
Nope, not what it means.
Chris Jolly says, here's another biggest truth bomb out there. Dead on. Dead on. Holy crap, I can't wait to push that video out.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, let's just double check. Andrew, give me 1 second on your question, Andrew. Let me just make sure that nobody else has capacity questions. Okay, how about this one? Andrew also has Andrew's one of our shippers. He's very famous in Madtropolis because he's really smart, but he's also a smart ass and he picks on me a lot.
Probably justified.
Probably. We're not going to tell him that, though. He says that what needs to happen in the market before carriers like USA Truck will consider adding capacity to their fleets? Holy crap, good question.
Yeah, so I'll talk in general terms and then I'll talk about USA Truck. So, you know, USA Truck is a great company, was a great company for 22 years, had what we called the lost decade. They just lost their way. And it was mostly because of leadership transitions. And, you know, I by no means am trying to say that we figured that out. But if you look at our performance vis-a-vis the competition, we've closed about half the gap in the last 3 years. So we still have a little ways to go. So generically, you know, you want to run a really profitable operation. And when you can add freight that's accretive to your overall returns, you will do that and you'll add trucks. In our case, we still aren't as profitable as we would like to be. And so we're constantly rationalizing our network and rationalizing our assets. And so as a finance guy, I've made a career out of going into places and going, hey, I know how to make you more money. Stop doing the unprofitable, stupid stuff. And so, you know, the best carriers are rationalizing constantly. I don't want to name one of my main competitors, but they're the biggest guys and they do the best job. And when they started, very famously, they ran Phoenix to LA, LA to Phoenix, Phoenix to LA, and somebody would say, hey, can you run to Sacramento? They go, we don't do that. You know, and you get the densification, the profitability in your, you know, prescribed network, and then you're disciplined about where and how you grow. And so part of the, if you go all the way back, rewind to the beginning of our conversation, part of the issue in our industry is we just have perpetual ADD as an entire industry.
So true.
Oh my gosh. It's, you know,
Unreal.
it's produce season. I'm going to run to Florida. I'm going to run to California. So we're just constantly chasing, and it's this big balloon. If you squeeze it, it bulges somewhere else. You squeeze it here, it bulges over here. And you know, so for us, it's a really crappy answer to the question, but we're not going to add trucks until we're running the trucks we've got as profitable as we want, which is aspirational. And that just takes discipline. We're copying the guys that have done it best, and they're in a better position to do it. So maybe a better question for another guest that's really running well, or maybe one of your past guests.
I think that was a really good answer, actually, and very real, which is what we prefer. We don't want a bunch of corporate bull. We don't want somebody to speak in general terms. We want actually people to come in and tell us real. Excuse me. And, excuse me. So, hold on, let me just double check on this topic because this one seems to be incredibly hot. All right, now you got another shipper question. Tony Darnell, also another very famous shipper in Metropolis, he says that how does freight price reduction process even work? Is it cut and dry as the increase? I've heard every reason why the prices rise, but the market is maybe the only reason I've ever heard as a palatable for a decrease. Huh. So you don't get good, you don't have, so Tony's saying that he hears every reason under the sun for why prices are increasing.
Yeah.
Decrease, they're like, oh, it's the market. It's economics.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tony, you know, I don't want to read too much into your question, so maybe you can shoot us another question if I miss the mark here. But you're right. People say, oh, fuel prices are going up. Trucks are getting more expensive. Insurance costs are rising. Those things, by the way, are all true. So we want more money. Pay us more. But I really love the spirit of Tony's question because, again, I'm a guy that worked in commodity management. And you don't hear as much about this in our industry. Certainly you hear it in dedicated businesses, but as we work together to find efficiencies, so, you know, the most famous way is via backhaul rev sharing, right?
Right.
You know, everybody kind of knows about that, but that's a way where as you identify opportunities that can be mutually kind of accretive to both entities, you can reduce price. And so my answer to Tony would be, you know, he's right. Markets really, it's supply and demand that really drives prices down when they go down. But this is maybe a unique position from USA Truck, and I'm not trying to give away all my profitability, but if I have a customer, we have several, that are willing to work with us on pickup and delivery times, freight configuration, whether it's live or, you know, drop or, you know, whatever, some sort of kind of pre-planning, pre-commitment, longer-term commitment. There's all kinds of things we can do to improve the economics of the transaction. We would be more than willing to share some of the incremental profits back to our carrier partner or our shipper partners, excuse me. Just because in my mind, you know, look, it depends on everybody benefiting together as we're kind of chasing it higher and higher. So anyway, again, I don't know if that's the best answer, but I'm open to it if Tony ever wants to talk to us.
Yeah, and he totally probably will. So V has one more question. Sorry, this is a really good topic, and you're actually let me make sure I'm not insulting anybody. I don't think so. You're one of the first that can come on and I feel like truly and authentically teach us from a carrier perspective. Um, I maybe it's just you got good energy too for a live production. So V has another question. Do you prefer to focus on specific lanes or do you like to focus on specific industries?
Yeah,
Question.
what a great question. It's, I see this other question above it about what did COVID-19 teach you about your org and what will you change?
Oh, I missed that one. Sorry, Chris Jolly.
No, it's all right. But I think they're kind of related in a really wonky, weird way. It's kind of how my head works. So if you were to ask me a year ago, do I prefer lanes or industries? I would tell you absolutely lanes. It's about, because if you think about how you build a transportation company or a trucking company in particular, you identify the lanes where you want to target, where you think, per the story that I told earlier, you can build density because there's all kind of benefits that accrue from densification, right? You get lower fuel costs on those lanes, you get better economies of scale on your repairs. Maybe most importantly, you can get drivers home so drivers can come in and other drivers. So I tell customers all the time, we are a network first company. If you just leave it there, that can sound kind of offensive. But I follow that up with, we're only going to bid freight for you that we believe we can reliably service. And so I think you want a carrier partner that's that committed to their density and the lane structure that won't just, there used to be this company that got accused all the time of you call, we haul. Like, don't be that undisciplined, because frankly, that's what got USA Truck in trouble in the past. So definitely prefer lanes. Now the COVID tie-in about specific industries, I'm very careful, even in this format, to only say things that I've said publicly. So I'm not really going outside the lines at all.
That's probably because of your CFO experience. You can manage that dynamic.
I was busy, slapping CEOs upside the head for saying stuff they shouldn't say.
Yeah.
And will do the same to me tomorrow. So, but one of the things we said in our last earnings release is going into COVID, we were really worried, like everybody, about what is this. So we did all these doomsday scenarios. We classified all of our shippers into essential, what I call quasi-essential, non-essential, unclassified, which we didn't know what to put them in, and then brokers. And over 80% of our customers were essential shippers. And so we were kind of high-fiving and chest bumping in the hallway. Everybody at USA Truck was excited because we've made it through COVID, knock on wood, relatively on par with what we were doing before, which, by the way, wasn't very good. But we weren't really hurt by it. And a lot of people felt good about that. And I'm like, time out. Like 99.9% of your career, you're not going to be in a pandemic. And so what I kind of realized, and my chief commercial officer helped me a lot with this line of thinking, we bounce a lot of stuff off of each other. There are verticals, there are industries that need to comport, they need to align. The industries need to comport with the lanes. And those are industries that are higher margin industries. They may not be shipping right now, but they're things like, well, of course, pharmaceuticals are shipping, but, being an e-com leader, like focusing your efforts on e-com where timeliness, speed, security matter. Auto parts, auto companies, we all have been on the planet long enough to see the highs and lows of, auto tests, cyclically, and you can predict it. But they pay extraordinarily well, and we don't do any auto. So there's this crosshatch, we used to call it, I'm an old dirty analyst, they say, this crosshatch analysis that needs to be done to help you understand where the right lanes that you want intersect with the industry. Now, as a shipper, it can be really frustrating. Why won't you quote all my freight? I don't want all your freight. I only want the freight that works for me. And so that's hard too internally with our salespeople. And our salespeople are awesome. They've done a really good job of pivoting. But when I first got here, they would just like kind of dump things on the table and go, quote it. And we're like, we don't want any of that freight. So they have to be a more dynamic, frankly, intelligent salesperson that understands what I'm selling is the specific network capacity that we want to fill. And so it's not that you're filling customers' needs, you're filling customers' needs that align with your organization's priorities.
Okay, you're going to get some new best friends on this show. I see the shippers going nuts on both feeds. So for my shippers out there, I did write down, so we can talk about it later too. You call, we haul. We're totally going to reuse that word many times in Mad
It's
Travel.
not a compliment.
It's not at all. And not at all. It's actually exactly what shippers do not want. Every shipper, let me think about, no, every single shipper, including our pharmaceutical shippers last Friday, say the same thing. You hear like common themes on these shows. And one of the things they say is, do not take my freight if you don't know my freight. They
Yeah.
don't want a you call, we haul at
Well,
all.
and if I have shippers on the line this call that are rolling their eyes, I mean, we fail every day. Like, don't get me wrong, and we're not proud of that. We're trying to fix that. But I would say, on balance, we're markedly better than we were before. But again, it's a commodity industry. Like, go to 50,000 feet. Think about how commodity businesses run. So in this environment, where everybody is trying to preserve their freight basket as far as carriers go, there's 95% plus. First tender acceptance. Service levels are extraordinarily high. You're not going to get a lot of opportunities if you don't service the freight you already have. And so service matters a lot.
Yeah.
Right now, in 2018, I mean, I'm sorry, shippers, it didn't matter as much. We had shippers that would call and be like, hey, just take it. I don't care when you deliver it. I just need somebody to take it. And that's not me messaging that service isn't important. It's a 50,000 feet. It's a commodity business. Service needs to be appropriate for the marketplace. And everybody knows that. They don't have to like it, but I don't like it either because it means there's variability. But that's the way that it works.
So it's interesting because I'll tell you, if it makes you feel any more comfortable with Madtropolis talking with all our shippers and our brokers and our carriers when we join together on Fridays and fight out all sorts of issues. One thing that shippers will tell us is that they don't want to be pulled away from their favorite carriers and their favorite brokers. If it happens, they always know that they're going to come back, and or they often will tell their network who to use if they can't use. I'm sorry, I'm responding to a couple comments in here, but
Right.
they will tell their other shipper friends or network to use these certain carriers. And something that's interesting too is it's actually hard to find. It's hard to find a good carrier and a good broker as a shipper. There's no one spot you can go to that you can trust that's going to weed out all of them for you. And that's something new that I've learned as well. So it's sorry, it kind of sounds like a side rant from what you were saying, but I just wanted to address a couple comments that I saw going through.
No.
And I didn't want people to run too far with their statements, but
No, it's true. It is hard. I acknowledge that it's hard. And why is it hard? I mean, I'm trying not to name names, but the biggest carrier in the entire industry makes up 1.5% of capacity.
it's just nuts.
Right? And so if you go to talk to any econ professor that studies, macro markets, they will tell you, and I mean, I was at Intel, we had 85% market share. When you look at other kind of commoditized industries that have consolidated, the mathematical kind of construct indicates that, and this is kind of a rule of economics, that in commoditized markets you should have one dominant 40% player. If this is a $1 trillion industry, where's the $400 billion transportation company? It's not there. And that's because it's so fragmented. So there's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to mention about my earlier comments, and I said it was about service. I mean, your price, it's like I said about the Porter's article on, what is strategy. Your price has to be right. Your service has to be right. Those are table stakes. Those are the rules of the road. And then, you've got to be able to execute. And so one of the ways our chief commercial officer likes to say it is that, price gets you in the door, service keeps you there. But I would say both of those things are table stakes. They both have to be right for the time and space in the market.
You want to know what this could be so wrong, so you're a perfect person to ask. Are brokers making our industry more volatile? Because they are technically the employers of the 80% of the small trucking companies. Are they the reason why large trucking companies don't actually have a larger share?
Um, that's kind of an existential question that's probably asked like of a rabbi or priest. I don't know the answer. Um,
And no
because
one, probably no one knows that answer, and they're all like,
yeah,
"What are you
I
doing?
just
Stop drinking, Cassandra."
no, it's like you've got to have look, if you're this shipper that works in transportation or um, or procurement in your company, one of the you got to think about what are the reasons that we have these kind of inconsistent um, uh, kind of, I hate to say it this way, but kind of inconsistent broker volumes. One, if you look at the big shippers, it's because they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket with one carrier. And we already demonstrated by our discussion about how fragmented the industry is. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. It's impossible because nobody's big enough. I mean, the biggest guys in the industry cannot serve all of Walmart's freight. They don't have enough trucks. So on the one hand, they don't want all their eggs in one basket. They got to make sure they got a toe in the variable market so that they can, make sure they keep everybody honest in the transaction. That's one. The other side of it, though, and you got to remember this, the whole kind of economic crisis that we're in right now has been pretty illuminating on this topic. I'm going to make numbers up here. Maybe somebody on the call knows the real numbers, but it's something like 50 or 60% of the entire economy is small business, right? Well, guess what? Joe's Shake Shop down the street, they don't have a procurement department. It's Joe and his wife sitting at the kitchen table, and they need one truckload every 6 weeks. And they're not going to enter into an asset agreement. They're going to call. I mean, when I lived in Michigan, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but my next door neighbor was a freight broker. And I came home one day and he had shot a deer in my yard. I lived in a neighborhood.
Drop a deer right in your yard?
Yeah. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, it wasn't a busy day. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. But Joe Shake Shack calls that guy who's sitting in his deer blind and says, hey, I need a load. Now we've gotten more sophisticated, right? Yeah. Some big tech players that are coming together, kind of trying to reduce the frictional costs of executing here. But I really think that there's a copacetic coexistence. And I wouldn't say that it's brokers' fault any more than I would say that it's asset carriers' fault that brokerage is such a tough business. We're in both of those.
Ooh, that was a good spin on that.
It's critically important to the environment.
That was a really good spin. Chandler, one of my favorite brokers, he said, I'm his neighbor. James let us swim in the pool and cook on his grill.
It might have been.
Chandler. So I got sucked in, and I didn't pay attention to the time. So we've got one more topic. Andrew Teal, what do you want to talk about? Since you're our lead person today, you get to tell me. We have too many topics that apparently I picked. So we're going to talk about where do you see the growth, and why is the trucking industry so slow to change? And the other one is the loss of capacity due to COVID permanent? And Andrew is probably ignoring me.
We can probably hit on all those pretty fast.
You think so? All right, let's do it. What do you want to do first?
Well, I don't know. You ask the question.
Okay, first one. Where do you see the growth in our industry right now?
Look, in commoditized businesses, you know that there's going to be consolidation in some shape or form. And so the way to grow is to provide additional value. And I'm not saying that's as 3PLs or 4PLs, but I really do believe that the way that you grow in a commoditized business is you create a differentiated service experience that people value, and that's how you're going to grow. And so it's the things we talked about. You're going to grow through specific vertical focus. I would caution, especially any small carriers that are trying to figure that out for themselves, don't try to be all people. That's a guaranteed way to fail.
Yep.
Simple answer, just provide value. You provide value, you're going to grow.
I like it, you guys. So the next one was, why is the trucking industry, not the transportation industry, but the trucking part, I should say not the industry, trucking segment of our industry, why are they so slow to change?
It's a really easy answer. There's no incentive to change at all. So when I talk about Intel a lot, but it was such a formative part of my career. We used to ask in our interviews for people, hey, would you ever be willing to sell below variable cost? And any business owner knows that you should not do that, right? That's a surefire. That's a used car salesman loses money on every car and says he'll make it up in volume, right? You can't do that. But the right answer to that question as an interview question is absolutely. If there's a first mover advantage with technology. So think about it. If you're producing a technology, an iPhone or a new chip for a computer or some new technology, or I won't get into our own supply chain in trucking because I think it's a little too controversial, but and if there's a first mover advantage, it makes sense to take losses. Well, in our industry, there's no first mover advantage. There's no need to be on the bleeding edge of technology. Why? Because of all the reasons we said already. It's a highly fragmented, enormous industry. If the biggest guys in the business do something really cool with their 1.5% of the capacity, guess what we'll do? We'll copy them. And so that's why there's no economic incentive to be an innovator. Because if you are, and it works, people will copy you.
Wow. Okay. So the feed's blowing up because of that statement. I can like that. They like that. Someone said I love this whole episode. I do too. Okay. The other question. What did I just forget? I forgot something. Go back
COVID,
to
capacity.
Yeah, COVID and capacity. Is it permanent for the next 6 months or for the next year? Well, who knows? I know, but
Yeah. So again, I'm sorry to keep talking about the industry from a 50,000 foot view, but I think
that's why you're here.
It's never permanent. So here's what'll happen, right? So the guys and gals that weren't performing well going into exiting 2019, coming into 2020, had a lot of headwinds. Those headwinds were exacerbated by all of the social and health issues that we all are aware of. And the government stepped in and mitigated that for a season. How long? We don't know. But inevitably, in a commoditized business, the poor performers will get pushed out. And then what will happen? Rates, it's this whole conversation that we've had. The rates will rise, and then people will, and I say this all the time, every job's easier the further away you get from it. A lot of people go, I can make a lot of money buying a truck, so I'm going to go buy a truck, and it'll swing back. So is it permanent? Absolutely not, because nothing fundamental has changed about the economics. I was sitting with this rancher friend of mine, telling him, I find myself, I just, as far as my personal politics, don't like government regulation, but as a trucker, I like it because it creates a barrier. I find myself endorsing ideas philosophically that don't align with my heart, but economically they're the right thing for our business, which is more barriers means fewer kind of fly-by-night guys and gals getting in that are just going to drive rates down. So
yes, and that's true. I think everyone who's listening to you would absolutely 1,000% agree with you. And I'll tell you that, including one of my favorite people at your company, her name is April Arnold. She is in your safety group in Accent.
We know April.
Oh, I love
April's awesome.
love her to pieces. But she'll agree as well, because from a safety perspective, I think that the community, actually I shouldn't say community, the entire country has a different standard of how safe a truck and a truck driver and a trucking company should be compared to what the regulations and what the law holds them at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, we were talking to our brokers the other day, and I always feel a little bit Pollyannish in saying this, but people go, well, what's your collision goal for next year? And I'm like, 0.
Yeah, what the hell kind of question is that?
It's, that none of us should be satisfied until we stop wrecking trucks and stop especially hurting people. I mean, there's nothing more sacred in our responsibility than getting people home safely to their families. That's more important than anything else we do, honestly.
And wait, for all those out there who are truckers and truck drivers, because I have a lot of them, and they're going to get mad when I just started yelling about that. What he meant was, it's the intent behind that answer. Obviously, you're always going to have crashes. So when I worked for lots of different trucking companies, one of the biggest accidents was when someone would fall asleep. A layperson in their car would fall asleep and cross the median and hit trucks head on. Obviously, as a trucker, you can't help that. So you're going to have some crash statistics.
Yeah.
What he was getting to was the intent behind the answer.
And maybe, I know we're running short on time, but maybe I can just make it a little more personal. So in 1951, just outside of Glens Ferry, Idaho, my great grandfather, who was raising my mother, was killed in a train crash, and that forever changed the arc of our family's history, and certainly changed the father figure in my mother's life. And so, and I have pictures from that crash from the Idaho Statesman, and so it's really personal, and we talk about it. I've shown pictures of the crash to our employees. People need to get home, and so collectively our mindset needs to change.
I agree. And I think that the only way for that to change often, and people don't want to hear me, some people do not want to hear this, but I do promote that certain types of regulations may be needed for better safety and for more stability in our industry. You know who doesn't want to hear that probably? Our consumers who buy the commodities. They have to pay a higher price for the higher transportation costs.
Yeah, but if it's their kids, their wife in the minivan next to the truck, at the end of the day, we all have a vested interest in the same thing.
So you have 3 minutes. Do you have anything that you think the community needs to know, since you have shippers, carriers, and truck and other and different carriers from a different sizes all here? Is there anything we need to know in the industry that you think we're all missing when you see a lot of chatter or people asking the same questions, or did we hit on everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really simple thing. Right? Relationships are based on essentially trust and communication. And for whatever reason, companies are wired to not do either of those things well. And so I used to talk to all of our driver classes, and I still try to do that occasionally, but we have a video now. But one of the things I say in that video is to drivers, if you want to be successful in our industry, you need to communicate, communicate, communicate. When you're done doing that, you need to communicate some more. And if you think about really everything we've talked about today, being a procurement professional, being a shipper, being a transportation professional on the carrier side, they're hard jobs. Yeah. I mean, remember what I said, that's one of my favorite own cliches. That's probably not cool to have your favorite self-made cliche, but every job's easier the further away you get from it. I think a lot of the challenges and the volatility could be solved with communication. You think if a shipper called me, and many of them do, if a shipper called me and said, hey, look, man, I'm getting my teeth kicked in by my CFO. I have got to get closer to the spot market. I don't have to get all the way there, but I got to get closer. Can you help me? Man, I would much rather take a lower rate from them and preserve the sanctity of my network that I put so much effort and investment in than lose that freight in the open market and have to go back there. Like, we create so much waste. And again, a cliche I use all the time is, that rework is the most offensive form of waste. This industry works and reworks and reworks and reworks. It's terrible. And so my message, sorry to be so long-winded, is for both carriers and shippers, man, open the lines of communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you're done doing that, communicate some more. I really believe that solves a myriad of issues that we've talked about here today.
We have you for 1 minute. What are your thoughts about the direction our industry is going with autonomous trucks? Like, is that?
I was asked once about the inevitability. It's here. It's already happened, right? There's going to be a whole regulatory framework that's going to be a challenge for people, but it wrapped us back to what I said earlier about the incentives for the industry to innovate. It's a really cool idea. It's a really interesting idea. It can save lives. It can make us safer. It can do a little more reliable. But nobody's going to do it until the economics make sense. And right now,